Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Vivienne Parry. I'm the moderator of this very important event today, an event which celebrates European Depression Day and marks the launch of very important recommendations. To introduce our event today, can I pass you to our Irma Costello, MEP, and Angelica Workman.
Well, thank you so much for the introduction. Also a very warm welcome from my side. And also on behalf of the Stephen Hughes initiative on depression in the workplace, of which I'm proud to be part of, actually. We mark the 10th anniversary of the European Depression Day. If you briefly remember, it was launched in 2003, and the aim was at that time to put like a focus on depression as a serious and life-threatening condition affecting more than 30 million people in Europe. I believe everyone can understand just from the number at that time how important the issue actually is. My thank you goes to all the panelists for their presence today at this event and for sharing their experiences, their knowledge, and their expertise with us. And I'm sure we will have a very fruitful discussion and exchange of views, and also a discussion on how best it is to address depression in the workplace. And I also want to thank my colleague Irma Costello, whom I would like to give the floor right now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Angelica. Down here. Thank you very much, and good afternoon, everybody. You're very welcome here to the European Parliament. I would also like to add my thanks to the European Depression Association on their really excellent initiative to hold European Depression Day and to put this very important topic on very firmly on the EU agenda. This year, as you're aware, the theme is depression and the workplace, and today we're working towards trying to develop a policy at EU level and also at national level to improve the situation. Stress, anxiety, fatigue are the biggest health problems and indeed the biggest challenges that are facing European workers in today's world. So in order to achieve an EU policy and to be able to debate and debate and formulate policy, we are launching a paper here today which has been drafted by leading experts on depression on the workplace and have been offered the support of representatives of very key stakeholders from the field of health and employment. The expert recommendations that we will be looking at today are aimed specifically at providing input as to how to support employers and employees in European workplaces by introducing measures to tackle depression in employment policies at EU and national level. In my own country, in Ireland, I have followed and am very impressed indeed by the work of the organisation AWARE, which is working to help people and families overcome depression. And indeed, in my role as a public representative, prior to coming to the European Parliament, I was a politician, a city councillor, and indeed Lord Mayor. And I think I have experience of seeing how the financial crisis has actually impacted on people and has led to very significant levels of depression, particularly in the workplace. I think that the document that we're discussing and launching here today is a very important first step in addressing the issue of depression in the workplace, and it also provides politicians like myself and indeed those at national level with very concrete tools as to how we can actually address this very important societal challenge. So again, thank you. I look forward to the debate and the discussion that will take place here today, and I would like to hand you back now to Vivienne, who is going to moderate our discussion for us.
Thank you very much indeed. I'd like to bring into the conversation at this point Amelia Mustafa of the European Depression Association. Amelia, does having a day like a European Depression Day really make a difference?
I think it does. Although more people know about depression, and certainly people are becoming more aware of it, it's still hugely stigmatised. We still see massive amounts of people not seeking help or treatment. We still see people being stigmatised, especially in the workplace. And we need to focus on a condition that is actually the biggest health burden in the world, or will become the biggest health burden in the world. We're not saying that it's not more important than any other mental illness, but what we are saying is that we need to address something that is known as the common cold of the mental illness conditions.
And to make sure that we're all on the same page here, what exactly do we mean by depression?
Well, I can certainly tell you what the clinical definition of depression is, and it's a mood disorder that has some very physical effects. So as well as symptoms we might be aware of, like low mood, there's also cognitive symptoms like lack of concentration, forgetfulness, inability to focus, and these have a severe impact on someone's ability to just function in a normal day-to-day life.
Now, can I bring in Clark Carlisle? Clark, you're currently the chairman of the UK Professional Footballers Association, but you have experienced depression in the past yourself. What does it mean for you to have a European Depression Day?
Well, I'd like to echo Amelia's sentiments that it is vital that we address the stigma that surrounds mental health issues in its entirety, but particularly depression. Because what immediately springs to mind when you speak to a non-empathetic person about depression is an image of weakness, an image of self-deficiency, when actually this is a bona fide illness that needs to be diagnosed and treated like any other. But the reason that I support like European Depression Day and National Suicide Day that we had the other week in England is because it's not just the sufferer who needs educating. I think it's absolutely vital that we have a blanket approach to society's awareness on the issue. Because when you have a sufferer, it's incredibly hard for that person to step forward and receive the help and support that they need. So although, let's say, 1 in 4 people are supposed to suffer mental illnesses, mental health issues in England, there are 3 in 4 people who are looking from the outside in, who, if they were educated on the issue, if they understood what the signs and symptoms were, they could hopefully be free to actually acknowledge it in the other. And without it being judgmental or accusatory, it can be as simple as, oh, you look like you've got a cold, have you seen the doctor? Oh, you look like you're suffering low mood, you know, have you had that?
I mean, how difficult is it for someone, you were a professional football player, you're on a pedestal, you were talking about looking weak. I mean, for a professional footballer, that's extraordinarily difficult to admit any sort of what you were calling weakness.
Well, this is why I think these awareness and education drives are so important, because it's that initial perception of what depression is that then fuels the stigma surrounding it. So someone doesn't feel free because they know that the other person who they're talking to will see them as weak, as lesser, as being as having an inability to cope with stress or with situations or work life, when it's nothing to do with self. It's something that does need diagnosing and treating. And in a football environment, which is very alpha male, very machismo, where your first level of competition is actually your teammate, you don't want to confess something that will or may be perceived as a weakness. And that's why in our industry, I think it's vital that we have a uniform approach across every football club, where it actually runs in tandem with the industry and doesn't sit inside the football club. That way it takes away any conflict of interest, any inhibition to actually speak up, because it won't impact a person's career.
So when you were suffering depression while you were playing, how did it affect you in your day-to-day work?
Wow. I could talk on this all afternoon, but just to be quite simple about it, there was an entire week last season, as recent as that, where I could not get out of bed. I drove to work on 2 occasions but couldn't get out of the car, and ended up retreating back to my house and just locking myself away, not answering phone calls, not turning the telly on, not eating, not even drinking. It just like Amelia said, it takes away your ability to just function normally. And that's because even though I am one of the people who've made myself aware of what I was going through, even at that low time, I couldn't reach out and get the support that I needed.
Give me a guesstimate of how many footballers you think. I mean, you're in a different place now. You are, chair of the UK Professional Footballers Association. How widespread do you think a problem is?
Personally, I believe that it's far more prevalent in football than the 1 in 4 statistic of English society says, and that's because of the incredibly volatile nature of the industry. It's such a precarious industry where players not only is their performance assessed on a day-to-day basis by their manager, but success is defined on a weekly basis according to their results, and even their contribution to that is assessed not only by the fans but their coaches, their colleagues, the media, and this is done 24/7 via social media, so there is no ability to switch off from this industry.
And did you ever get somebody saying to you, well, what have you got to be depressed about?
Of course.
You're doing the thing that people dream of doing.
Of course. When you mention depression, a lot of people immediately assess the circumstantial evidence surrounding a person and see if they are worthy of depression, if they qualify to suffer from depression. When, if you are educated on this issue, you'll know that the facades that are put forward, if you wanted to have an Oscar-winning film, you should have a cast of depression sufferers, because they are the greatest actors in the world, and they will put on that facade as long as humanly possible. But when they retreat back to their safe place or their house, the story can be something completely different. But going back to football and why it's so precarious, players commit themselves to a career in football, and most sports people, to the detriment of all else, to the detriment of any alternative career aspiration, education. You're only one injury away from being out of your sport.
And does it lead you as well to self-medicate with alcohol or drugs? Because that seems to be a common progression.
They can be linked, yes. And one of the reasons I presented a documentary on this, but we kept addictive issues out of it, especially gambling and drinking, because even though the two are linked, they're not inextricably linked. And there are a lot of people who drink and gamble that isn't based in depression, whereas there are, some cases that are. And I think it's important to differentiate between the two levels of the issue, and focusing on depression and the spectrum of this. If you nip something earlier on that spectrum, on that sliding scale, you can prevent someone from sliding into self-medication and all the other disastrous consequences like suicide, and like myself, I attempted suicide at the age of 21.
It's a desperate, desperate place to be. Amelia, how can policy and policy makers help in this regard? I mean, you're at the sharp end.
Yeah, I think Clark's actually said it already, which is policy can't just rest within the country, because there's so many competing interests around economy, and what governments want to spend money on, dependent on their knowledge of the impact it will make on their citizens. But at European level, we can take a long, cold look at this situation and go, if we create policy that all the countries have to implement, then it will be done. Funding will be assigned. And I work on the front line, I work in services, and I know that there is no money at the moment for initiatives that look at depression in the workplace. There's no incentive for employers to address this issue, because they're not aware that how it impacts on their bottom line, and there's no one telling them they have to do it. So it's hugely important that policy addresses this.
And what about from your own personal experience, where employers have addressed this? What difference does it make, or can it make?
It can make a huge difference. You get happy workers, happy workplaces. You get people who are obviously still sick, but they tend to recover more quickly, get back to work more quickly. The bottom line for the company improves. Family life is better for those employees. there's just a whole host of benefits for society and also for the company.
And presumably it also creates a permissive environment in which people feel able to, and I hate saying this word, confess that they have a problem. I mean, they shouldn't need to confess. It should be something that they can just talk about.
Absolutely right. And what you get is people seeking help earlier. And if you seek help early enough and get those interventions early enough, you have a much better chance of getting better quickly.
Well, I'm going to turn to Towns, because you've actually come across this problem yourself. I mean, we're going to hear from you in more detail later, but just quick comment on that.
Yeah, it's interesting, Amelia, that you mentioned the topic of happy workplaces, because more and more companies and societies are debating on the value of happiness. And I think, coming back to the concrete topic, the workplace is a real good chance, on one hand, to prevent lots of depressions, and on the other side, to identify the people with depressions and to bring direct support to them. It's not the role of the executives to manage the support, but to offer the support. This is a real big chance at the workplace to bring them to networks, to psychiatrists, to psychotherapists, and to show that the company gives you the full support at every stage of the illness, and before, to prevent the illness, because we need the employees at the workplace, and for this we have different programs, but I think we will talk about this later.
And how about this permissive element? People feeling able to say they have a problem.
This is the first issue. If we are talking about debating on corporate culture, you need an atmosphere of trust, of respect, of estimation. It's the basic issue is how do we want to treat each other at the workplace. So what we require in our company is an atmosphere of trust, and we urgently ask our people, on one hand, to ask for support, and on the other hand, we urgently ask our people to look if there is somebody who could need support, and to address this topic directly to the colleagues. But basically, it's a question of respect to each other.
And Amelia, presumably this depression can present in many different ways.
Yes, I mean, I think people think traditionally that someone's just going to be sad. My experience of people with depression is they either find they're staring at walls for a very long time and not getting their work done, or they're in pain and they can't understand why. There's so many different ways. There are as many different types of depression as there are people, and it's a very individual disease. And so the recognition of it, it's so important that people know what to look out for, because when you're in the depths of a depression, you might not necessarily recognise it yourself. And friends and family and employers have a real role to play in providing support and saying to someone, I think you need help, I think you need to take a step back.
And European Depression Day in itself is a recognition that this is a really important subject.
Yes, yes it is.
Fantastic. Now we've got a video, I think, next, which we're going to hear. We're going to move now into thinking about the recommendations.
Kept on the agenda and is now rising up the political agenda at Brussels and indeed at national level. Now, the European Union has played a very important role over the years, and during most of my 30 years as a member.
He was speaking without moving his lips, which is a very good trick.
Hello, my name is Steve Hughes, one of the Vice Presidents of the Socialist and Democratic Group in the European Parliament, and one of the founder members of our interest group to combat workplace depression. I'm really sorry that I can't be with you today. I'm representing my group at an event in Budapest this week. I would have liked to have been there particularly to mark European Depression Day, but also particularly to be there to witness the formal adoption of our recommendations on workplace depression, the policy recommendations that we've been working on in recent months. I'd like to thank you all for being there today, and I'd like to thank in particular my two colleagues, Angelika Werthmann and Emma Costello, who are co-hosting the event for you there today. I'd also like to congratulate sincerely the European Depression Association for their consistently good work over the years. This is the 10th anniversary of European Depression Day, and it's thanks to their unrelenting work that the issue has been kept on the agenda and is now rising up the political agenda at Brussels and indeed at national level. Now, the European Union has played a very important role over the years, during most of my 30 years as a member of the European Parliament, in trying to help protect worker health and safety. We've adopted a whole range of European directives to address all sorts of risks, machine safety, safety signs at work, combating noise in the workplace, preventing damage to workers from exposure to physical agents or medical agents in the workplace, musculoskeletal injuries, a whole range of physical dangers that workers can face. But it seems to me now that we really need to focus the European agenda on psychosocial risks in the workplace. There are a range of those as well, stress, violence, harassment at work, but one that I think is particularly important is the one that you're gathered together in Brussels today to work on, and that is the growing threat of workplace depression. The World Health Organization estimates that by the year 2020, depression will be the second cause of disability globally, not just within the European Union. It's estimated that around about 10% of the European population, European Union population, that's 50 million people, suffer from some sort of depressive disorder. This is a huge problem. It's a huge social and human problem and a huge cost to the European economy. So we really do need to address it. Now, the workshop that I hosted on March the 6th, those of you who were there will know that that was a very good event, but also that we did decide on that occasion to launch an exercise to draw policy recommendations to combat workplace depression. That work went extremely well, and I'd like to thank everyone from our expert and advisor groups who've worked to produce those recommendations. Those recommendations you will formally adopt today, but we did take the liberty of already forwarding them to the Commissioner responsible, Commissioner Laszlo Andor. He's had them, and he's promised that he will bear them in mind in framing the next strategy for health and safety. We really do need to make sure that that new strategy, to be adopted quite soon, addresses psychosocial risks at work, but in particular workplace depression. The work is far from done. We'll be watching that strategy when it appears and making sure that now in our parliamentary work we make sure that workplace depression features prominently in that future strategy. We need to make sure that from 2014 onward, in the new mandate, this is one of our highest priorities. We really do need to tackle this scourge. Many, many thanks for being there today. I regret that I couldn't be there today, but I promise I will be there at our next meeting. Thank you.
Well, someone who's very passionate, I think. Yes, absolutely. I think that's very much deserved. He's somebody who's absolutely passionate about this issue. Let me introduce Dr. Martin Schutter. Now, Martin, you're Scientific Director of the Division of Work and Health for the Federal Institute for Occupational Safety and Health. Yes. Why did you get involved with these recommendations?
First of all, if we have a look upon the statistics, we see that there is an increase in the number of pensions for reduced earning capacity and also an increase in the number of unfit for work days and caused by psychic disorders, and the diagnosis behind this is, for example, depression. I think there is another point we should mention and should take into consideration, because if we look at the hazards from physical load routinely when we do our inspections in the companies, but the hazards resulting from psychic load or something like that is often ignored. And in Germany, for example, there is only a small part of companies take into consideration the psychological load occurring during work, and, for example, there's only a small part of companies where you get an advice in which way you have to alter the workplaces. Measures for workplace design must be deduced from these risk assessments, yes, of course.
So you're saying really that there's not only is there a very clear economic case, but actually that the current health and safety at work legislation should have depression added to it because it is such a key cause behind a lot of potential difficult situations and accidents at work.
Yes, that is, if you have a look upon safety, for example, then if you have a depressive person and you have safety conditions, then it is absolutely necessary to identify this person, yes. And therefore, it is necessary to do risk assessment which take into consideration also the psychological load conditions. Yes.
Give us, if you can, an idea of the scale of impact of depression on somebody's cognitive capacities. Is there a way that you can help illustrate that to us?
The colleague here on the table said already that you have loss attention, fatigue, and something like that, and that are consequences which are bad, and we have also negative consequences, not only resulting from this depression, but also from psychological load conditions such as monotony, satiation, and so on, and that is critical, yes.
So Clark was talking earlier that he just couldn't get out of bed and couldn't get to work, but absenteeism is only a part of the problem, because what we call presenteeism, in other words, where people are there, but they're just not functioning in their job, is perhaps a problem that we have completely overlooked.
Yes, I see. The presentism is also a big problem we have to tackle with. But let me say something about workplace design. I think important is that we have to consider the consequences of work conditions already if we plan workplaces. We have to estimate the consequences of our planned working conditions. And we have tools, for example, simulation tools, which give us hints in which way you can alter the planned working conditions to avoid negative consequences. That is important for me, in my opinion.
So you've outlined the kind of economic and the health and safety aspects. Angelika Wertmann, as a policymaker, why have you become so passionate about this subject?
Simply because I always stood up in working as a politician to see where is the well-being for the citizen actually. What can I as a politician do and contribute to the well-being, to improve the situation of our citizens. And I was touched by a figure that I read just recently, that 11,000 suicides per year happen in Germany. I don't know about my own country. I did not go into these statistics details, but it is shocking because a great part of these suicides are actually related to depression. And that makes me really think, and that makes me really aware of the responsibility that employers have on the one side and employees have on the other side. And I can only welcome the call for openness, the call for trust, for mutual respect for each other, that if an employee actually stands up and says that he or she is suffering from depression, that this person is not going to be punished or somehow stigmatized. Because there are so many people who suffer from depression, but who actually don't want to talk about it for whatever reason. They have their reasons. They get to listen to the answers they receive when they open up. And I think that needs to be tackled on the one hand. On the other hand, it needs to be tackled that as an employer, if you're an employer and you hear that your employee comes to trust and to ask for support, that you at least listen to this person without saying, oh yeah, sure, depression. You know, all these remarks that people get then. That makes me feel very sad, and that makes me also aware as a politician of the responsibility that we all have. Not only the people who suffer from depression, that they open up and that they ask for help and for support, not only the employers to listen and to handle the issue responsibly, but also as a politician to give them some kind of, I would like to say, safety net, so they know how they can move, they know how they can maneuver, they know what they can say. Because if I, as an employer in Austria, would say or would recommend to that person, then you should go and probably see a psychologist, I might already be at the border where I would get into trouble because of tackling like a personal issue. you're not supposed to do that as an employer.
There are all sorts of barriers, and I wonder if there's a particular barrier for women, because obviously depression is more common in women than it is in men. I mean, physiological effects that we still quite haven't understood the reason for. But is there an issue, a greater issue, do you think, for women?
I'm sure it is. I'm sure it is. Women at the workplace suffer somehow already discrimination. We all know about this. We don't want to get into one of my most loved issues in politics. We don't do that now. It's not the place here. But imagine that as a woman, you already suffer from depression. So you probably have a job where you do exactly the same work as the male counterpart. And you're already being discriminated for whatever reason. Every company, every employer has his or her own reasons. And then you are at its point of time, so to say, in the development of the disease, to say, go to the employer and say, I am suffering from depression and I would really appreciate your support and your help. I do not want to go beyond this imagination and think what this woman then would actually experience. I'm sure it is double or triple discrimination in the end, and no, it certainly is more common, also because of the fact that women are more prone to suffer from depression than men, actually.
Emma, I wondered why. What was your motivation for contributing to these recommendations? What sparked your interest in this subject?
I suppose just the alarming increase of suicides that are taking place in my own country, in Ireland. But again, you can see that this is something that is happening across the world. And I would say too that I have family members who have suffered from depression, and I suppose maybe when it visits your own family as well, I think that maybe you start to actually try to understand, because I do agree with what has been said, is that there can be people who are very non-empathetic with people who suffer from depression. And I think it's when it visits a family member or somebody that you know very well that I think you can start to relate to it. And then as a member of the Employment and Social Affairs Committee, I think that it is incumbent on all of us as politicians to do what we can to address the issue of depression in the workplace, and to recognise the fact that depression is an illness, that it creates huge problems in the workplace, and yet, as has been said, that it is stigmatised. So I think that there are issues there that really do need to be addressed, and I want to commend Stephen Hughes for taking the initiative in the first instance, but would say that I am very proud and delighted to have the opportunity to have an input into this, and hopefully see the development of real and concrete policies that we can take from this.
For you, I mean, they're all important, but for you, what speaks to you particularly amongst the recommendations, and what sort of impact do you think it could have?
I think there are a number of the recommendations that are important, but I suppose where I would look to is the first recommendation, I think, is particularly important, where it says that the European Union and Member States should actually ensure that citizens are protected from the psychosocial risks in the workplace through legislation. And I think that that is important, that, as Stephen has said, we have directives on various different health and safety regulations on musculoskeletal disorders, and yet at the same time we've ignored the psychological well-being of our citizens in the workplace. And so I think that it is important that we do actually have legislation, and particularly, as Stephen has said, the health and safety strategy, which we're still waiting for, but I think it's going to be particularly important that that health and safety strategy does actually address the issue of depression in a way then that employers can see that it is a serious matter, it is a serious illness, and in a sense too that employees can feel that they don't have to phone up and pretend and feign some different type of illness, that they can say that that they are suffering from depression, and that they can actually seek assistance from their employer without fear of recrimination from that.
Angelica, for you, what's the recommendation that speaks to you, and how much of a positive impact could it have?
Simply the one where we talk about the responsibility. As I said before, that the responsibility is not only with the employers but also with the employees, to give them kind of a safety net. That's an essential in my view, because otherwise, if we don't have this, it's like the basis for everything. Otherwise, we don't have any solution. If we don't feel this responsibility, we can have laws and legislation endlessly. But it is like it has to start from within the problem, and that's the human beings.
Dr. Schutter, what about you? What would be the key recommendation for you, and what sort of impact do you think it could have?
In Germany, we have good experience with the so-called joint German strategy for occupational health and safety. And this strategy is supported by the assurance companies, which are responsible for work-related accidents, by the government, and by the federal countries of Germany. And they have a big aim for the next years. They said, okay, we have to do prevention and strengthening in this called of mental health. And they decided jointly to do different actions and to be successful. And the different actions are, for example, first of all, the increasing the awareness of companies for a psychological load or depression. Then we have we need tools, for example, to identify, to assess psychological risks. Then another aim is to look, for example, of good practice.
And do you think these recommendations will further support that?
I think that is a good way in Germany, and we should wait with these results. And I think and I'm very optimistic that this strategy will yield very good results.
Very good. Now, I don't know where he is, but Alejandro Cercas, are you here? Well, you're a bit of a hero, really, aren't you? Because Stephen Hughes isn't here, but you are, and you are a co-founder. So just what's your comment on what we've said so far?
Yes, first of all, I want to say I am very happy to be in the European Parliament.
We like happy.
Because, as you know, in this house, we talk about the money, the company, but it's very often, it's very rare, very strange to speak about the people. And for me, Europe is a vision of the people and the problem and the solution for the problem of the people, not only the problem for the market or the economy. For me, I'm very close for your work, and we are concerned. It's very important for us this day because that's mean for us a support in our demanding about the new strategy on health and safety. Because as you know, we are waiting for 2 years now, and the Commission never found the moment to present this new strategy. And I think it's very important to make in the table the problem of the middle and the middle of the European who are in front of the new challenges like the depression and the problem related to the mental health. Because, it's my last words, we are fighting now against this idea of in the time of crisis, it is not the good moment to improve our compromise with the health. Because in the moment of the crisis, on contrary, I think, is the moment of the problem are bigger and bigger. And the mental health and the pressure and the pressure also with in front of the world is growing and growing and growing. And there is evidence that we need to react, because in other case this crisis will mean a very dangerous moment to come back.
So there's a very small silver lining, and Amy, you were mentioning it before. There's a very small silver lining to a financial crisis, in that it points up something that perhaps if we'd not had financial crisis wouldn't have been quite so visible, but which was always there and needed attention. So I'm not saying we should have regular financial crises, by the way.
No, absolutely not. And I think that while it has highlighted the problem, I think it has also highlighted the need for investment in the issue, because very often too, at times of a financial crisis, the tendency is to try and contract and say, well, we can't afford to deal with this issue and we'll wait until the crisis has passed and then maybe we will try and invest in it. And yet we see that the more that the crisis takes hold, the greater the problem. Like in Ireland, they estimate that there are approximately about 100 additional suicides taking place each year. And think of the very, very black places that these people are. And that's additional. It's happening globally as well. So the financial crisis is presenting us with many challenges, and I think that we, as European policymakers, as European legislators, have to lead the way and say that there is a clear need for a policy, and certainly awareness raising is hugely important, and I really commend you. I think that this is an excellent document, and I hope that it makes its way into every SME and employers.
Booklet you have here. This is one of yours.
It's really, yeah.
So Amelia, this is your.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's really excellent, and there is a need for awareness, but I think that we need to do so much more than just create awareness. I think that it needs to be underpinned by a legal basis, and we do need to say that we need that we need legislation, and we need the member states to take responsibility for the issue of depression and for the well-being of their citizens.
Now, let me turn now to two people who've already made it work. Andreas Tautz is Chief Medical Officer, you've already heard from him, at Deutsche Post, and Fernando Lomata, you're a member of the European Commission expert panel on investing in health, but in your role in Spain, and perhaps you'd explain that, you've already done a lot of work in this area.
Well, thank you. Yes, in Spain I have been Deputy Minister at the Ministry of Health and Regional Minister in Castilla-La Mancha region, the Ministry of Health. And I have been really privileged to have the opportunity to participate in this tremendous process of reforms in mental health field. I remember when I studied medicine 40 years ago, I used to go to a large asylum in Valencia where patients were locked and the treatment were very, very simple and painful. And for me it has been a very, very stimulant experience to be able to participate in the process of change, to build mental health services based on the community, working hand on hand with the families, with the patients' associations, very important thing, of course, working with the employers' associations, trade unions, and with the media, the different stakeholders. So
and
one of my...
what sort of impact you've had?
The impact has been very important. For example, the rate of suicides decreased from 14.8 per 100,000 people in 1984 to 7 per 100,000 population. So it was a tremendous decrease, and it was a result of a lot of work. But unfortunately, as has been pointed out in this meeting, from 2008, the suicide rate has increased again. So as a consequence of the crisis, or perhaps of the management of the crisis, we are having now new problems to deal with. And my idea is that it has been possible to improve things tremendously in the mental health field and in the prevention and treatment of depression. I like mention also the Helsinki Declaration on Mental Health that focus the attention in prevention of disease and the mental health promotion, very important thing. But I'm worried now about the management of the crisis, as have been pointed out. And my message is that if we work together, if we collaborate with the employers, mental patients associations, and politicians, and we can obtain profitable results.
So what I'm hearing from you is that there is a great strength in collaboration, and that actually there's a very important role in legislation to set the framework and set the direction. But you're already living it. Tell us about Deutsche Post.
We try to living it because it is.
Tell us first of all. Obviously, it's your postal organisation. How many employees?
It's Deutsche Post DHL, and with DHL we have about 475,000 employees around the globe. In Germany, we are working with about 200,000 employees.
Now, those DHL people on television are always smiling when they deliver your parcels. But presumably, there is some mental health issues for them, and indeed all your staff. How have you overcome them?
Yeah, we are happy when our employees are happy, to strengthen again the wording of happy. But one other basic issue is that we try to tell the stories for our employees why every job in the company is useful. For example, within logistics, we bring people together. Logistics is very important for our daily living, and so every parcel courier is very important for our company, but for the society itself. And we try to explain to everybody the sense of his jobs. I can tell a lot about our activity matrix. For example, staying in Germany, we are working with about 70 occupational health physicians which are employed directly by Deutsche Post DHL. So we have a network where we can work with the employees, especially with the employees who need special targeted help. We are working with an employee assistance program. We have a clear management system in the company where we have in every little enterprise health circle. For example, in Germany, about 150 health circles, which met 3 times a year with representatives of the employer side, of the employee side, with experts like occupational health physicians and safety engineers, and they should talk about their local challenges on health. And very often we see that mental health is a big topic, and we try to learn from each other, because when you said the financial crisis could be a chance to discuss the topic of mental health, and especially depression in Europe, we learned from another activity. Every year we award best practice health promotion activities within the companies with 8 corporate health awards. And we learned especially that our Asian colleagues are very active in the topic, especially Chinese and Taiwanese colleagues in the topic of mental health. So it's a topic around the world, and we can do a lot of with our special expertise. We work together with health insurance. We try to bring to build up networks of integrated therapy. But basically, it's what I said before. It is the way or the question of the company culture. Are we willing to drive ahead with a common understanding that we have to work together, that we have some common rules? How do we want to treat each other?
And and just very briefly, what's the impact been? How long ago did you start this policy?
We have just started a new health, safety and well-being strategy, because what we learned is that the well-being aspect is not really common around the world. We have it sometimes in the US-American setting. The input or the coming out is that we broadly discuss the topic of health, of mental health in the company, that we have aligned on special activities, that we have focused on the very important multiplication function of executives that we have started with special training courses for our executives around the world. The first issue was to create a common understanding of the different wordings in the field of mental health. For example, when we talk about stress, we have so many different attitudes towards the word stress. So when we start a debate, we now are in the favorited situation that everybody knows about the people are talking about.
I mean, we must crack on with this, but I just quickly wanted to ask you, you're clearly a leader in Germany in this particular field, but what would the impact of policy at a European level be for this area, do you think? I mean, having been so involved in it yourself.
I think mostly we would be really happy if we had a global policy, but every policy which is aligning more and more countries in society is very helpful to debate or to align the strengths of the different partners to follow targets. So this is again what I said before. We discuss, debate, that we have the same understanding about the topic, and we can go the same way with the different companies, with the social partners, with the politicians, to create a better society. It's not only the question of workplace. So
policy creates a very clear framework for you and gives you that underpinning in order to be able to go out.
I hope that it is this way, but I'm really optimistic, yes.
We rely on you. Now, can I just introduce Vincenzo Castigliola? Is he here? Is he somewhere
Thank you very much.
I just wanted you to comment. You're president of the European Depression Association. What are your thoughts on these recommendations?
First of all, let me thank everybody. Let me thank the MP hosted us in this place and also for all participants to this meeting. I think today the depression is a social problem, and we need to speak in terms of the social and economic aspect. Before it was just the stigma, it was the illness the people don't like to talk about. Today we accept more the idea of the pathologies, but we need to consider the important the social and economic impact of the depression. This is what we would like to do with our Depression Day, to draw the attention of the public on this specific pathology. It's not always invalidant pathologies. Is something very light, something can we accept. We don't give the right diagnostic because the people don't feel good, it's at home, it don't work for 1 week, and so on. This is the idea. Our concept is this one, to really focus the attention of the depression as a social illness with economical impact. And what we expect from the policymaker is this one, to think about and to create the tools capable to detect in advance the pathology and to offer the possibility for the treatment as soon as possible for all patients.
So early intervention, prevention strategies, but also that clear focus on economic measures, because without those economic measures and a way to make sure that you've got them, then people perhaps might not listen. It does focus the mind, doesn't it, the economics? Is that what partly was a driver in Deutsche Post?
Yes, absolutely. It's from the employer side, economic figures are a good argument to convince people, but this should be not the only argument. It is, again, for one sentence, what we did in 2008 was we changed the whole value systems. We have one clear headline, it's called respect and results, and this means no results without respect. So, and everybody is arguing in this way. Every employee is free to argue or to ask when he feels treated in a bad manner, to ask for the respect, and so this is a very basic instrument of the company to develop on topics like mental health.
I'm pleased to welcome Jürgen Schläflein. where are you, Jochen Stefan? And forgive me if I've pronounced your name wrong. Your thoughts about this, and also I was thinking about the legislation on health and safety. I mean, where are we with that, and how does this all fit into it?
Well, I'm not the right person to speak about the plans and the deadlines for the new strategy on occupational health and safety at European level, because that's handled and under the responsibility of Commissioner Andor and his services. I'm coming from the Health and Consumers Directorate General, and we have launched together with DG Employment the so-called European Pact for Mental Health and Wellbeing, and have worked together on that, and have helped to bring depression and mental disorders higher on this agenda in the workplace environment. We have also launched earlier this year a so-called joint action between member states, where the idea is that member states with their authority work together to develop a framework, a commonly agreed or agreed common framework of action on mental health, and that would indeed be address workplace issues, and also how to strengthen the interface between the health sector, health systems and workplaces, because it's a responsibility for both of them. And in that regard, I hope that it will contribute to creating this level playing field and common understanding. And I very much welcome the recommendations that have been developed by this group, and will be very pleased to forward them to these groups. And I would also like to mention that the member states' rising awareness, is signaled by the fact that in 2 weeks, or next week, on 10th and 11th of October, the Lithuanian presidency is going to organize its presidency conference in health on mental health issues. And there, for instance, the EU Agency for Safety and Health at Work in Bilbao will present its campaign on psychosocial issues at the workplace. So workplaces will there not be the central issue, but will be an important issue as always. And health systems are also very important, and it's important to emphasize to member states that in times of crisis, they should not cut funds there where the needs are increasing in these difficult times. Or that where cuts in spending for health are unavoidable, then attempts should be made to compensate by better use of funds. And that's the work that we try to highlight at the conference and through the joint action and other project activities that we have going on depression and other mental disorders. And in fact, just to refer to a small awareness-raising project that we did ourselves, we've launched earlier this year a study prepared by Matrix Insight about the economic benefits of workplace health promotion and disease prevention interventions and their contribution to economic, social and health policies.
Is it your feeling, I mean, clearly you've been biting ankles in your workplace colleagues for some time. Is it your impression that actually they are really beginning to listen about this? Because it does seem to be rising up the agenda quite rapidly.
Yes, I cannot speak for them, but clearly mental health issues are now high on the agenda of occupational health and safety policies, and there are a number of activities going on. For instance, a study is under preparation on mental health at the workplaces, which will be a major study to evaluate whether the legislative frameworks in member states are able to cope with the challenges in this field, and which is invited to develop options for new approaches. And there will be a conference in December on occupational diseases hosted by DG Employment, which will also look, among other fields, into psychosocial issues. So the awareness has certainly grown a lot since the start of the last European Occupational Safety and Health Strategy, where promotion of mental health had been entered into the strategy as an own priority. Now it certainly is very much recognized as a high priority.
Clark, I was wondering, you're listening to all of this. What are your thoughts about this, listening to the discussion?
Well, it's fantastic to hear that so much work is going on in this area and that people are being proactive about it. But there are certain aspects that I think we've got to be just a little bit careful about. To impose legislation is fundamental to have uniform application of something across all industries, but it will place an expectation on someone like Andreas at Deutsche Post, which is fantastic. It's a supranational organisation, but there's a fundamental approach for the high street business, the high street employer, that we can't expect them to fulfil, you know, the same...
so the smaller businesses,
yeah, and
you don't have occupational health.
So we talk about the responsibilities of employee and employer. One of the fundamentals of that is not just awareness, it's education. I've had so many players come to me, so many coaches and managers, after I brought this issue to the fore, the players saying, I know there's something wrong with me, but I don't know what it is. And the managers and coaches saying, I've got a player who's got something wrong with him, and I don't know what to do. So I think one of the fundamentals of this legislation has to be that, just like a first aid trainee at an organisation, someone has to be educated and be an informed signpost for a sufferer or someone who's going through. So all these other things are fantastic, but there has to be a fundamental starting point where there is one person at that organisation who understands. And if they don't know what to do, which is highly unlikely at small organisations, they know exactly where to point someone. And I think that has to be key to everything moving forward.
There's a big role then for organisations like yours, Amelia.
Yeah, I think what Clark said is just incredibly sensible. And I actually think the hard work's been done with the policy writing and this, because you need to get things down on paper, but actually putting them into practice is really simple. It's about having a good culture. It's about people knowing what to do. We have all the answers. We know how to treat depression. We know how to recognise it. We just need to spread that knowledge so that everybody plays their role that they're eminently able to do, and we'll be able to tackle this problem effectively.
So yeah, and just to add to that, I think that employees need to understand that it's not the employer's remit to make them happy at work. It's their employers' remit to ensure that the systems are in place, that they have the support mechanisms should they need them. I think that has to be identified.
And what do we do in the European Union, in this building? Anybody know? That's a good question. To make people happy? I shouldn't go there. Any comment from anyone before we... Tell us who you are. Just shout.
My name is Olga Kozhaeva and I represent Mental Health Europe. I would like to, first of all, thank you for the opportunity to be present here at this very important occasion, which is the 10th European Depression Day. And thank you to the European Depression Association for your initiative. At Mental Health Europe, we're an umbrella organization representing NGOs as well as users of mental health services all over the EU and other European countries. We have also responded to the consultation which was actually recently launched on the occupational health and safety framework. And many of our points indeed echo what has been mentioned today. I would just like to add that if you will, certain points which in our view are very important, and that is resilience building, to integrate resilience building modules into employee training, as well as into social support, which is provided to people outside of the labor market, and even in the educational curriculum, to really build people's stress resistance as well. A very important aspect for us is the inclusion or reintegration of people who are experiencing mental health problems back into the labor market. And for that, of course, combating stigma and the understanding of the issue by the employers is key.
And briefly, if you would.
Sure, absolutely. We also advocate on policy level for involving the users of mental health services. Women are also a very important part, and we are happy to share a project that we have done, especially on violence and harassment of women at work and their effect on mental health.
Okay, thank you very much. Anyone else?
I'm Mary Luceno, a European Depression Association. I would like to say that it's also very important that once you do identify the patients, that they have a place to go, because in some places you have to wait 6 weeks until you can see a psychiatrist, and by that time you might well be dead. The second point I would like to make is that in Switzerland there's 4 suicides a day, one of which is always in front of a train. We did an anti-stigmatization campaign in Switzerland, which looks a little bit like this in purple and white. We had stickers. I went to various train stations in Switzerland, put the stickers up. These people who suffer from the people who are committing suicide made me personally come back under threat of putting me in jail and take all the stickers off again, because it's making the train stations dirty. So if we have this kind of attitude toward some people who are doing gratis work to improve mental health, it's a long battle.
I fear that it is going to be a long battle, but it's a battle that's incredibly important and one which we really need to address. I'm going to take one final comment or question and then to wrap up.
I'm Joanne Norris from ADHD, that's what I'm representing today. We work very closely with depression because a lot of our families deal with this as well. It's one of the comorbidities of hyperactivity disorder. I just wanted to say one thing. I would like people to take on board that we have a lot of research in Europe now that says that undiagnosed ADHD often leads to severe depression as an adult, and that many of the people who are suffering from depression might want to be assessed to see if that might be the underlying condition, because some people don't get help by the medication they get for depression. We see that quite a lot, and there's a lot of suicide in our community as well.
Thank you very much. It's going to be an incredibly brief.
It's actually going to take up that point, because you mentioned ADHD. I think you've got to remember that depression isn't just, I mean, in the classification of mental illnesses, depression is F32, okay. But depression is it's also a symptom of many other disorders, including things like bipolar disorder, and then comorbid with things like ADHD, post-traumatic stress disorder. I saw patients from the Balkan Wars in 1991, in 2006, and they were being treated for resistant depression because nobody realized they had post-traumatic stress disorder. Now, the point is that once you pick people up, you need to assess them properly and treat them properly, because the treatments are different. But that also impacts on the workplace, because in England, if an employer, employers of large organizations at least, are obliged to employ a number of people with disabilities. And you can count in the people with major mental health problems who might have perhaps bipolar or something like that as people with disabilities, which then has consequences for both the employers and the workers, and can enable the employers to help the workers more. So it's really, really important that once people are seen and have a place to go, the actual diagnosis, rather than just the umbrella term depression, is made so that they're treated properly.
So depression obviously is I absolutely accept it's a symptom of many, many different things that need to be investigated properly. I mean, one of the things that we seem to have established absolutely categorically is that we need to include psychosocial risk, and specifically depression, in the upcoming strategy on health and safety at work. But I wondered if our two MPs would like to conclude our meeting for us. Your thoughts, Emma?
Yes, well, it's It's been a short meeting, but I think it's certainly been very productive, and I think that the discussion has been very, very enlightening around the whole issue of depression in the workplace, around the stigma that is there, around the fact that it is never really spoken about, and that I think that we are now bringing it out into the open, and that this document is really doing is really going to have a major impact. I would like to just thank all of our speakers. In particular, I'd like to thank Clark for his contribution, and I think that it really did, it brought home many of the issues, and I think that you spoke a lot of sense, you spoke very frankly, and I think that it's incumbent on us to look at the recommendations and what you're saying and to carry forward with them, as indeed Amelia as well. But indeed, all of the speakers, I think, have provided us with a certain degree of expertise and information, and I think that armed with the information that we have gleaned from today, the recommendations that we have in this document, as member of the European Parliament's Employment and Social Affairs Committee, I'd like to drive these forward. I'd like to thank the representatives from WHO, EU, OSHA, OECD for their contributions to the recommendations that are actually in this paper. Finally, just in the light of the new Health and Safety at Work strategy, I would like to encourage the European Commission, and I'm sorry that somebody from Commissioner Andor's cabinet isn't here as well, but I would hope that this would be taken into consideration for the next EU Health and Safety at Work strategy. And can I just tell a very quick anecdote? The other last week in Strasbourg, we were talking about health and safety at work, and we were doing this at 11 o'clock at night. We had all been, I had been in the European Parliament since 8:30 that morning, and we were having the debate on health and safety at work and working time at 11 o'clock that night. And as the debate concluded, the chairman said, "This has been a marvellous debate, and 9 women out of 11 speakers have contributed to the debate." So maybe just raising the issue around women and stress levels. I thought it was interesting that there were 9 women still there at 11 o'clock to discuss health and safety. I was, but I really like the idea that we have to go with health, safety and well-being, and I think that maybe the idea, the concept of well-being needs to be incorporated into the strategy. So on that note, just again to thank everybody for their participation and to hand over to Ms Worthman, who is our co-host here for today's event.
Angelica, your last words.
Thank you so much. Also, my thanks to everyone, and especially to Clark. And I think this is exactly the way it should be done, because we have people here, we listen to people who are actually affected by, if I may say so, the problem, the depression. They can tell us what we need to do, what they want, what they really need to be attended to. And I think that's the best way that we can actually tackle the issue. And I hope that with all the guidelines and the recommendations that we have, that we really make a big improvement to give people with depression a better life in the workplace. And first of all, I think much more respect for each other, that we can go out and talk about this issue, depression in workplace, and try to train the people a little bit, try to train the people a little bit to be more aware and to be more courageous, actually. For thanking everyone, I would also like to highlight a concert tonight, a piano concert tonight at the auditorium at Place Flachet. It is organized by the European Depression Association to celebrate the European Depression Day. And thanks everyone for the support and for being here at this important discussion. Thank you.